All right, this is episode 15 of Crom Updates. I am joined by the Jason Schoonover. Sir, how are you doing this morning?
Pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, Saturday morning. Just we're at the beginning of Saturday. We'll see how I am on Sunday night.
So we met through um, Turbo Pit Fighter, the Indie Comic Exchange, and we had you over there. And we're going to be having you back on soon because Jake and I are getting very, very close to finishing our second Turbo teaser. So we'll have that whole exchange again, and then get an update from you about what you're working on. But I invited you to be one of the few artists that I'm reaching out to contribute a Crom the Barbarian pinup for my revised edition of Crom the Barbarian Collected, which I put together in
Yes.
2018. So I sent you a copy. You have made your way through it.
Oh,
Right
I
before
loved
we
it.
got on, right before we got on, share again your response to the forewords that I have in here.
I really loved what you had to say because I mean, when it comes to comics history and stuff, like I'm an amateur. There's some things I know about, and some things that most things are just a blind spot to me. Sword and sorcery being one of those blind spots. So I really appreciated your like kind of history going, into Gardner F. Fox and John Junta, and how this was like the first, technically the first Barbarian comic, while Conan was still in pulp novels. And then it's there's definitely a lot of I picked up a couple of these at the comic book store like over the summer, and this is the
Nice,
first time I've ever
nice.
had a reason to crack into them. But I mean, I just in the first couple of stories of Conan, you could see a lot of seeds of Crom, not just in like you mentioned on one of the previous updates how Conan's god is Crom, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very telling kind of reference there. But yeah, I just really appreciated the simplicity of the story, especially compared to a character like Conan, who seems more driven and has like a goal in mind. Crom is just like all base. Like he just happens to find themselves in these adventures, similar to how like Mr. Magoo would wander into a
I love
construction
that.
site. Um,
I love
but it's I really like that. There's a lot you can do with that like really simple dynamic that can be, it doesn't have to be funny, which I think there's a lot of elements for comedy that can come for that. But it also makes for like a great like kind of adventure story where it's very easy for the adventure to feel bigger than the main character. Um, but the main character Crom in this instance, we just kind of take for granted that he's the strongest of the barbarians, and he can cut through. Or there's not a challenge he hasn't met that he couldn't either cut through, stab in the eyes, or beat to death, which is very fun.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, and you do bring up the kind of humorous angle sword and sorcery has been dragged into in parody comics and stuff. There was a great cartoon, Gorth, I think his name is, or I'll have to bring something up and put it in the thing. But it was done so well that it did bring me to tears, in humor, but also in sadness because it is something that I think even within comics is a pincushion for the ridiculous, the
Yeah,
nonsensical, the like the masculine. There's just I think there's so many things that really kind of bring it into unpopularity,
yeah,
but
oh for sure.
for me, it is exactly what you said. It's just a place to go and have fun and
Yeah,
be silly, be ridiculous, and escape,
yeah,
and having found the Crom the Barbarian as a public domain, it even makes it funner. So now I'm not trying to control an IP here. I'm actually trying to
yeah,
contribute to an IP. And then by having, artists like yourself come in and contribute to it, it just I'm really hoping this project really sort of gets people to start looking at it a lot differently than just straight up silliness.
I think it definitely could because comics, especially like the older ones, like the core of comics is like you want to convey something, um, it's like a gesture drawing. You want to convey it with as little
Yeah.
moves as possible, and a lot of times you have to
Yep.
tend towards exaggeration or ridiculousness.
Yep.
And then when you combine it with like high fantasy or something like that, it's very easy to turn it. But I think, like you said, like focusing on the idea that it is escapism, and then even like what I think is really brilliant, what you're doing is taking that public domain and basically being like, I just like the aesthetics of this. This already comes
Yes.
with a name built in, and this is kind of how the character acts, and it just kind of provides for you like a blank canvas with a couple of parameters to stick to here and there. That is just enough, I think, for like creative freedom. You know what I'm saying? That you can kind of,
Yes.
because you got to have a little bit, you got to be put in the box a little bit, so that way you're forced to make decisions when you're, creating something. And I think the beauty of like a public domain, especially with one, there's only so little of it to read, is that you don't really have, like, my big problem is like, oh, I'm consuming way too much and I'm not making enough. And I think when you come to something like this, it captures your imagination just enough to where it's like, there's a good roadmap for what to do for like more adventures of Crom, I think. And it seems like it's virtually limitless, aside from, there's a couple of things you have to maintain here and there. But
well, the fun is really getting into like just with David Molina and Drawn Sword right out of the gate. Their intro video, went down the rabbit hole. I'm going down, but I'm not publicizing it as much right at this moment. But it's the Counter Earth. This could be like a Thundar the Barbarian, post-apocalyptic, post-apocalypse. Like there's so much here. I really have so many issues with rules, but as you just previously stated, they're nice to have as guardrails. But even getting up on those guardrails and even kind of jumping off, maybe falling down the hill, dusting yourself up, getting yourself that's a greater sense of enjoyment for making than just producing art and comic and making making your lunch money at the end of it. So there is a lot of excitement and potential, I could say, lying in here. With that being said, Jason, what are some of the initial thoughts you're having in the way of like him as a character and representing him in a pinup?
Well, I was looking a lot at the like there's a battle scene here. Let me see if I can find it. And I started sketching that. Where is this battle scene at? And it might even be from the Zangar one, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, so it's from the Zangar one, page, what does it say, 19? But this guy right here, I love this panel. So one of the things I was looking at, I've just been kind of like picking out panels and like doing quick studies of them. And one of the things I did a little bit more than the other ones was kind of flesh that out. So like I, tried to emphasize like more of an animalistic nature. I gave him like fangs and darkened his eyes and stuff, because I figured like, oh, maybe he goes into like a berserk mode or something, like from like the Northman or whatever. That seems like something that it probably gets Crom out of his adventures more often than not, is just kind of letting go and then coming back to it, and everything around him is dead. So I thought it'd be cool to like kind of emphasize that. And then the other one, I really liked this character in the first issue, Dwelth the Magician. And I liked the idea that Crom is, he's abducted by these like this other tribe, and then he's adrift on their boat after defeating them and lands on his island. And Dwelth goes into this whole thing about how oh, but it wasn't fate that brought you here. It was my, I was controlling the winds and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to do kind of like a classic. I mean, I don't know what era. It's probably, like a 70s or whatever era comic books. Again, I'm not a historian in any means. I just see stuff and retain it. But I wanted to do Dwelf kind of looking down on his vial that was meant for the Fountain of Youth, and then Crom trapped inside. And then I was going to use, which pose was it? This pose, and try to get a good, maybe like take some pictures myself, but get a little bit more of a real life reference and do like what do you call it? Get pretty close to this pose to where it's paying homage, but I don't want to be lifting it exactly.
Right.
So I thought that would be kind of cool to just have him like trapped in the vial here. I got to blow it up a little bigger.
Yeah.
And then I have some other notes that I jotted down here. Oh yeah, here's another. So we were talking about like alt Earth and like alt history kind of stuff. So are you familiar with the the story about the SEAL team that defeated the Kandahar Giant in Afghanistan?
No.
So this is like conspiracy theory
real
level stuff. I don't think this isn't real at all. I don't think this is real, but the story goes that like a SEAL team in Kandahar, Afghanistan came upon this cave, and basically a giant was living there and like speared a few of them like through the chest, and they had this battle or whatever. But when I was reading this and it's going into like I think there's mentions of like Atlantis, but there's like a lot of alt Earth stuff. I'd be like, oh, well, that'd be fun to have Crom fighting alongside the SEAL team against the giant. Just like kind of thoughts like that. But
I love it. I love it.
The main one I think I'm going to stick with here is this kind of Dwelf one, though. I was getting a real kick out of drawing it, and I took a really fun reference photo, which, let me grab my phone. It's actually a pretty funny picture. Sometimes you got to take these photos yourself if you can't find a reference, so that way, number one, people can't accuse you of stealing, and number two, it also gets you thinking, I think. So I took this kind of goofy photo of myself to stand in for Dwelf. And let me see if I can get them both in the shot, but it's serviceable.
Right.
Kind of, it'll work. I think that's one I'm going to go with, because it seems like I could get the best resources for that. But just do like a classic kind of really thick lined, drawing or illustration of just like this really, you want to like, I don't know. I get the idea, like you said, you want to kind of up the, not the ridiculousness, but the exaggeration. And I think when you look at like, I guess I really wish I had like a cover or something in mind, but I feel like I've seen lots of comic book covers where the bad guys looking down at little teeny tiny heroes, and I just figured that aesthetic would work perfectly.
Yeah. No, there are. But yeah, one of the main reasons I brought you on was you have a very fine arts angle or skew to approaching comic books and cartooning, which was the initial reaching out to you for the Turbo Indie Comic Exchange. And then I was in the initial stages of contacting people and meeting with them. David Molina and I were conversing, I think it was the last episode with him, and he said, oh, are you going to reach out to Jason Schoonover? And I was it was actually like a day or two prior thinking, wow, this would be a really great, like, kind of a juxtaposition, kind of a splitting, if you will, and having people who maybe lean more towards mainstream look and feel towards somebody who has like I said, a fine art skew. And then I just had a recording last week with Adam Dodds, and I actually brought him on because there was so much similarity between the two of you. So I thought this would be even better, because I have been with Turbo Pit Fighter, really playing around with the idea of inking, and I'm just using all sorts of tools in order to create gray values
Yeah,
in order to
I've
then
been
when
looking at what you're doing here, and like I love the ballpoint pen aesthetic, but like this is really like it's giving it a lot of weight. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you, thank you. But it's I'm becoming more and more conscious about allowing things to be, and then
Yeah,
dealing with them more fine arts and less professional illustrator. In other words, like, oh, it doesn't look like that, or it doesn't look like this, but at the same time, for me, it gives enough information to keep things moving. Like one of the most interesting things that I came across. I just brought these pages to a completion point where then I will scan them, put them into a test printing, and then I'll have Jake come on and he'll give me some good AD. But the
yeah.
back of this guy's leg has been one of the most interesting things for
Oh yeah, I
me,
could. Yeah,
in a shape of the back of the calf, but then how it ended up creating this. I wanted to put just more reflective light on top of this character, this grimacing character, and then of course the spearhead going into the black shape. So
yeah,
it's more thinking in relativeness to black and white elements and composition
yeah.
of an image than it is to just be like, oh no, man, that's not how you draw the calf of a giant.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You can't be like too overly concerned with realism. Like I always go back to I had an experience. I think this I might have told this before, but I don't know, that tells I had an experience a few years ago. I was at my dad's house and I was watching Aliens on his TV and we were both watching it together for a little bit. And at one point in the movie, he just gets up and goes, this just isn't realistic. I can't take it. I'm like, the movie's called Aliens. Like, if they didn't have you at the title, I mean, like, I don't know what you would have thought.
some
I mean,
people
yeah,
there are people out there that just cannot handle
yeah.
fantasy. They can't
It's
handle things that are not constantly providing relevant truth to this existence that we're
yeah,
in at any time. And it
yeah,
just freaks them out. It just freaks
yeah.
them
It's
out.
like we could still explore this relative truth, but like we have to understand the way we're exploring it is going to contain giants and barbarians and possibly aliens. You know, we could still get at this truth through kind of a trap door, without trying to drill straight into it. You kind of have I don't know, that's where I think
Yes. Yeah.
fantasy and escapism is kind of important. It's like, obviously
Yeah.
you can go too far and never come back or whatever. And but I think there's a way with some of these things, especially when you keep it simpler, like being able to kind of get at these real life kind of things that we're always thinking about, but in a more playful way.
Yeah, I mean the barbarianism has always been a number one for me. Ninjas were always number two,
Yeah.
but the barbarian idea. I mean when I saw Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger the movie and that
Mm-hmm.
opening, I didn't know what a Nietzsche is, but when you saw that which does doesn't kill you makes you stronger,
Yeah.
and you're like,
You understand it
uh,
immediately.
oh wow, and
Yes.
then you go through the Conan the Barbarian experience as a movie, and I have always been locked centralized to that. And then of course the I think the biggest spoiling of my childhood was it's the Savage Sword of Conan
Oh
comics,
yeah.
and most importantly, John Buscema being inked by Alfredo Akala. And
Yeah.
when you talk about weight, that's all you have in here. So then when I was
Yeah.
flipping through other comic books, the color was always nauseating, and then the pages themselves had no weight in them. So I was pretty
Yeah.
spoiled and hammered in very early on by about 13 years old. So as I'm moving into the golden twilight years of my life, I'm only interested in spending my energy and investigating this more and more. And
For
I want to
sure.
drag others in. I want to drag other people
Yeah.
in.
Hey, I'm happy to go down that whirlpool with you.
Well, that's awesome. Now, the big thing that I'm getting everybody to understand at this point, and we kind of touched on it before we jumped on, is that sword and sorcery, black and white, indie, comic books, yada yada yada. It's not a big money making industry, and I'm not expecting to bankroll anything other than us having the ability to see ourselves in print. Because for me, these pages are only one step closer to this art form. This is the art. And when I had done these pages in ballpoint pen, I was completely satisfied. But now as I've grown over a couple of years, and then re-engaging Jake and working on Turbo, and then bringing in all this other stuff. Now I wanted to bring this revised edition and look to it. But what I've been getting everybody on board with is that, have you heard of virgin covers in comics?
No, what is that?
So one of the things is, they do Kickstarters, and Indiegogos is a very popular thing in indie comic publishing. I'm not going to do either one of those. I own CromTheBarbarian.com, which is a blog. Which, if you're watching this, this is the video that's also inserted into the blog. So go to CromTheBarbarian.com, subscribe, and you'll get the weekly updates on what's going on and everything. But the virgin cover is basically the cover without the the title on it.
Okay.
And so it's just the art. So the way it's going to be is that my copy of and my cover with Crom the Barbarian on it will be purchasable forever. But you guys will be pinups inside the book, and then each one of you will have a virgin cover.
Oh, cool!
And so you'll get copies. I'll get you guys copies. But here's where I think it's going to be really very interesting as a business model. Right now, tentatively, I'm expecting to launch this for release to the public in May of this year. Okay. So what'll happen is only for those days in the month of May will your guys' virgin covers be available. Then, based on sales and how things go out, I want to almost get as many your covers in your hands as compensation, because once June hits and somebody missed, the campaign, if you will, the release party. And they want a copy of Crom the Barbarian revised, but they really like the Jason Schoonover cover. I'll say, you can get that, but you got to go buy it from Jason Schoonover.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and then I am planning, if this is as successful as I'm really hoping it will be, and in less monetary, but just getting about 100 people involved, buying a copy or do whatever it is we got to get, for something. So if that can get, I'm going to move us into a Crom anthology. So I'll still be working on some Crom material, but you guys will be able to place your material in there and then promote yourselves there, and also kind of keep yourself on track. So every time a Crom anthology comes out, let's say after 6 of them, and you've got 25 pages or something, you now can collect them into your own book. You have a little bit of an identifier. We're help promoting you. You know what I mean? You're just not independent in the way of being like on your own and alone. That's
there's
really
kind of a source you can go back to a little bit.
Yes.
No, I like that. I was actually kind of curious about that because I've been rewatching your Crom updates and then having read this and like figuring out like, damn, I wonder if he's like, it really like this does have the potential to like build like not only a big network of artists, I think, like not necessarily build, but solidify or maybe coalesce a network of artists that are interested or even tertiarily interested in just kind of one thing. And I think, I mean, again, like I got I got a event I'm going to next weekend, but like this would be one of those things where it's like if I had a stack of these, I
Yep.
could easily talk a couple of people into buying them. Easily.
Yep. 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 Yep.
I think
And
yeah,
then
I love it.
good, 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 good. Because yeah, I think the toughest part nowadays as an artist is getting attention. And
Yeah.
then the thing that's even tougher than that is maintaining that attention. Now, here's
Yeah.
a really, I don't know if I've shared this before, but so when I released this, actually, I think it was even back here when I did just the Crom original story collected release. I purchased cromthebarbarian.com, set it up as a WordPress just to have a capturing of traffic. Now I
Yeah.
can say confidently for the last, I think it's been about 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
I've had over 100 people come to the website.
Not bad if you're not
So
doing any like marketing or whatever otherwise,
exactly. And once again,
Yeah.
it's that whole Crom the Barbarian, right?
Yeah.
Now, translation to sales has always been here and there. I mean, literally, I've always sold a Crom the Barbarian at least once to 3 times a month.
Yeah.
So that's always been something
Yeah.
nice. So I moved it from WordPress over to Squarespace, and it's a blog now. So I've set up, like for instance, your blog for this video. We'll give a little verbiage snapshot and visuals of what it's about. But then underneath where you can actually watch the video, there will be all your vitals as well. So
Okay, yeah.
how to get to your website, how to get to your
Yeah.
Instagram, so on and so forth. So it's that constant just kind of turning, as
Yeah.
things go along. So
I see exactly. Yeah, I'm kind of doing the same thing locally here. Like I've got a couple of businesses that I'm like, oh yeah, I could drop stuff off here and they'll post about it. I'll post about it. I mean, the event I'm going to next weekend, I do a lot of yoga. It not only helps me physically, but like mentally, it's also very good. But they invited me to set up a pop up and like basically do portraits and sell just sell all the crap that I do. So it's one of those things where it's like building those type of relationships like does like it's not going to guarantee sales, but it definitely like gives somebody a platform they wouldn't otherwise have. And I think that's the only way you can get by, especially in the comic book thing. It's like you have to have a lot of these collaborations and people promoting each other.
Well, my marketing strategy since getting back into working full time as an artist is I only want to get to the people who could own, in the world be like 200 or 300 of them that enjoy the same aesthetic as I do, whether they're an artist or they're just somebody that, every Sunday at 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, they read comics. So they just like having things, they got stacks of them and they just like having something there. And I really enjoy this story. I've read, that's the person I'm going after to be competitive, the competitive edge against Netflix and all the full color indie. But it's just ridiculous to try to scream as loud or do something. But I always find individuals reaching out and saying, "Hey, man, I really enjoy what you're doing. You're keeping the aesthetic of pulp illustrations and the real Conan the Barbarian comic kind of thing alive and everything." So that, once again, like I said, it's the marketing value here. I'm really banking on over time. Like I said, collecting 150 people who are just actively involved, not just passerbys. They're just people like, yeah, man, I want in. What's going on?
Absolutely.
What can I do? So, but with that being said, do you have any questions for me? Because the only thing we have left to do is you would do some sketches. Then I would have you back on, Jason, and we would review your sketches. And of course, you could do the table down, the camera down on the table, and we'll kind of just go back and forth in discussion about what you have.
Yeah, I'll have to figure something out for that. The only question I had, I guess, was involving this third story here, because this is the one, like, this is my favorite in the entire thing. And it's the thing that I noticed most about it was just the shift in artwork. It's still very, like, comic booky posed, where it's not exactly like true to life or everything, but like I'm loving like a lot of the details in the background, like how this log has texture, or on
Yeah.
what is it? This page here. This is my favorite page. This
Oh
is such an
yes. Oh
incredible
yes.
crowd scene, and then like
Oh
all these like
yes.
little lines in the rock. They're just so delicate, but they do so much to like convey like like little cliff's edges, or like if you were climbing it, like little handholds or something. I love these figures in particular. Like this could be a page all in and of itself, right here. Just these guys up here. But yeah, I ended up like looking this up, and I was like, man, who is this artist? And I Googled Crom the Barbarian Jack Katz, and I came across Jack Katz, and lo and behold, it was Zangar the Barbarian.
Well, Jungle Man. It's a Jungle
Yeah,
Man comic. So, yes, in all of my, I'm the custodian of the Gardner Francis Fox Library.com, which has
yeah,
all 156 books, paperback, vintage paperbacks that he has. And Crom is the initiator of all of this because it is
yeah,
very important. It's very important for me to maintain um, Fox's voice in this version of Crom. So I've been digging up everything he's done because he leaves comics in 1968 because of anti-unionizing and health insurance and setting
yeah,
page rates. He'd make more money being a paperback writer.
yeah,
But he did some freelance stuff, and this was with Skywall, and he did 3 issues. It was called Zangar Jungle Stories or something to that extent. So I get all 3 of them, and I get to this one, and I must have read it 16 times in one sitting,
yeah.
and kept saying, "This is not a jungle story. This is a sword and sorcery story."
It
So
really
when
is.
I said, this has to get immortalized, but it's going to be so disconnecting for it to
Yeah,
be Zangar that I was like,
yeah.
well, let me Photoshop it because all I have to change is
Just
Crom,
yeah, it's
and
just
then
that, and then every instance of
every
Zangar.
time, exactly.
Yeah,
And I did it,
yeah,
and I was like, oh wow. Now the other part of it is, and you even brought it up before we jumped on, was the historical value of me doing this is when you do get on and you find the original, then you're able to like go
yes.
off in that direction. You know what I
It
mean?
yeah,
So it
in
is a
whatever
little bit.
direction
It's
you
a
want.
bit of a
Yeah,
trick. It's a
yeah.
bit of a
But I
trick,
like that though. I like that
but
because
it
it's one of
doesn't.
those things where I feel like you kind of came up with a creative, like an interesting creative decision to deal with how you would include that. Because I think not including this comic would have been criminal. Because like again, the
Yes.
only inkling I had that there was something different about it was just the art, and I figured at first it's like, oh, maybe he just got a different artist. So, people, writers, and artists, they change and whatever. But yeah, but having gone down that rabbit hole, I have now just a footnote in my mind of, oh, Jack Katz. I need to look at anything and everything that has his name on it
For,
now.
First Kingdom, you're gonna want to start getting a hold of the First Kingdom
I'm gonna
stuff. So
jot that down right now.
that's yeah, that's a whole 30-minute conversation in itself. So
But yeah, I thought that was great, and it's like basically the only other way you could have included that is like, what would you have, like another page with a forward, but that would kind of interrupt the flow of everything. So
exactly,
I
exactly.
think even if it is a little bit of a trick, I don't think it was. I think it was useful because it did get me thinking, and it did
Thank you,
make
thank you.
something in my mind start turning, and now I got this whole like avenue to investigate. So
And that
yeah,
and that Jay and I know you can appreciate that, Jason, because that's the difference between professional comic book artist and fine artist is our job as an artist is to trick you to think about it differently. That's the
yeah. I
big
mean, it's
difference.
all a trick.
When you're
Yeah.
packaging, when you're packaging, when you're packaging something to try to sell it, you're in competition. And that's
Yeah,
just one of those things I'm not very interested anymore in doing is trying to compete in a marketplace. But if I can
yeah,
put
for
out
sure.
stuff and then it gets slid in on the side based on however it is marketed or come across, and something like that happens, that makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad I could make your day because that was definitely a nice surprise for me, and I'm always happy to find artwork that really does it for me. The other thing too, actually, one last thought. When I was reading this
Sure.
and listening to what you're trying to do, have you ever read like Rob Liefeld's Prophet
Yeah.
from like the early '90s?
I
Um,
never read it. I am aware of it.
So like that went on for a certain number of issues, and it's like basic like Image Comics like extreme kind of fare or whatever. But
Yes.
back in
Yes.
2014, a writer artist named Brandon Graham like basically picked up that series for Image, like started it right where like Liefeld left off, and then just like did his own thing with it. And it was like that was one of the comics I read that like really changed the way I read comics and kind of made me
Wow.
more interested in
I'll check
wanting to
that out.
draw comics. But I get a lot of that from like, you have this base here. You have your Rob Liefeld's Prophet, and then you have what you're doing here. And I think it's one of those things where like if like you said, if you harbor enough energy with writers and artists and anybody who's interested in contributing to this, I think you really could like I don't know. I think you would attract a lot more people than you think.
Thank you. Well, we're going to find out, and having you guys involved is super exciting because, like I said, the rundown so far is David Molina, Drawn Sword. I
Oh yeah.
did get a pinup from Ken Landgraf. I have Adam Dodds and you, and there are one or two people I'm still thinking I just need to be conscientious of time and
Yeah.
not overdoing it on my side. But as I've said before, I believe there's a good level of success that can be reached, and then once that does happen, and then moving into the next place with like Crom Anthology, um, I'll have a lot better understanding of what is maintainable and working forward on it. So
Definitely.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Jason, I will be in touch. Give you a week or two and see where you're at to then get you scheduled back on here to show off where you're at on
Yep.
your Crom pinup.
I should have some pencils done for you by then.
Awesome. All right. Well, then we will see you.
All right, Kurt. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.